It's me. I'm Scott Ellery. I'm the application expert. And then just kind of our schedule here, okay? Um, so again, PhotoView 360 for quick and rapid design iterations, and Visualize more for that end-use marketing material, right? So again, not everybody can necessarily visualize a CAD model, right? I would like to think it's pretty easy for me. It's generally pretty easy for designers because we work in it for 8 hours a day, but sometimes it's really, really hard to visualize it. And not only that, sometimes you may have different finishes, you may have 4 or 5 different options, and you want to be able to see what it's going to look like in those different options relatively quickly, but you might still be in prototype stage where you're not ready to really put together that marketing material. And that's really where PhotoView 360 is so handy, because it's built right into SOLIDWORKS. You can have the different display states with the different materials applied, and you can quickly render those out, show them side by side, so you can see right away, what might be good or bad about your design visually, right? And not only that, it gives you that level of depth that if you're not really good at visualizing the CAD model, it comes with all the shading and all the shadowing and stuff like that to make it look a little bit more realistic. Right? Whereas with Visualize is more, for the marketing material side of things. So because it is a standalone program, it can be used without SolidWorks. So you can give it to your marketing department. They can start putting together all of their layouts, and they can start working on the final, marketing material, brochures, graphics, what have you. And they can really put kind of that extra time in. It's more for that refined, final render look, opposed to the design iterations that you would get through SolidWorks. Okay, so not saying that you have to use PhotoView 360 for just the iterative stuff, and not saying that you have to use Visualize for just the end-use stuff. I mean, at the end of the day, whatever you're more comfortable in using and whatever you like better, I mean, they're both very good tools. The only advantages for end-use stuff that Visualize kind of has over PhotoView 360 is that it is a non-biased rendering engine. So you are going to get more realistic results in it, and it does have that GPU rendering as well, which should get you faster renders at the end of the day. Okay, so some PhotoView 360 tips. Okay, so there are some things that PhotoView 360 can do that Visualize cannot. And there's also some really handy tools to use within PhotoView 360 to kind of quickly get us to renders. Okay, so if we jump into SolidWorks, so one thing that PhotoView 360 can do that Visualize cannot currently, if we go under our render options, with PhotoView 360 we can do the contour rendering or a cartoon rendering. Okay, so if you wanted to render this out with only lines, we can do that in PhotoView. We cannot do that currently in Visualize, right? So if you wanted to get, essentially a result where you want to do kind of a crossfade between that contour rendering, or you want to do a full cartoon or contour render, we can do that in PhotoView. Can't do it in Visualize yet. We also have a lot of handy options as well. We've got a ton of control inside of PhotoView 360. As far as our lighting is concerned, we can go with fully customized lighting to control our reflections and refractions, to essentially, if we're going through multiple reflective panes of glass or translucent material, we can control our refractions and reflections kind of very exactly, essentially, in PhotoView. Most everything else in here we also have in Visualize. The network rendering in PhotoView 360, if you've never tried it, is also great as well. Now, some differences between network rendering and Visualize Boost. So network rendering renders on your machine, but pulls resources from your network, and it can be used as of 2017. It can be used with still frame rendering or video rendering, and there's no license required with it. It's free, so you can just install the network rendering client on as many computers as you want on your network, and you can pull and use those resources. So that's really handy for getting renders done quickly. Okay, and some other great tips for PhotoView 360 as well is the scene illumination proof sheet. So what this will do is this will let us quickly, get some different lighting options, and it's going to put that right up on our screen. Um, and it's going to allow us to see different lighting levels. So instead of going through and constantly changing our lighting to get exactly where we want, we will get actual examples of some different lighting levels with some different exposure levels, and we'll be able to pick graphically instead of going in and actually going to our preview window and changing our lighting and everything like that. And this one is going a little bit slow today. There we go. Right. And while that works out as well, we also have render regions. I'm not sure you guys have ever used them before, but if you only want to render a small portion of the actual screen, and what we can do with that essentially is we can apply a render region, and we can do the integrated display just to make sure that our materials are looking the way that we want them to look before we actually do the render. So instead of rendering the entire canvas or the entire design area, we can render one spot to make sure that it's how we want it to look before we actually go and go through the entire final render. So it can be really handy after all your lighting is set, everything like that, after your materials are set, to make sure you're getting the look that you want before you're actually going to go through and do that final render. Especially because it uses a lot less resources to just render out in that render window. So our proof sheet should be, there we go. Right, so essentially we get our original selection, right? And we have a lot of different options with render brightness, background, scene reflectivity. So it goes through a number of different options. We can choose how fine or how coarse the increments are. And as we click on one, if we say we like this one better, that's nice. It's actually going to update the selection with what I've chosen, and then it's going to update all of our proof sheets. So this is a really kind of easy way to get to the lighting that we're looking for without having to go through and minutely adjust, right? So the integrated preview as well. This is great as well if you don't want to necessarily do a full render, but your manager or whomever wants to see exactly what it's going to look like in kind of a rendered state. We can always pop on the integrated preview. We can do that obviously from our drop down as well. So we can go into our full. Oh, mine's not actually popping up here. But we can go into a fully integrated preview. Usually it's in our drop down over here. We can just turn it on. And it will render right inside of the SOLIDWORKS design window, so that we don't have to go into kind of that PhotoView final render stage to get our renders out of there. So you can get a quick preview of what it's going to look like. Okay, so some things that PhotoView 360 can do that Visualize can't. So it is, and a lot of these things can be used in conjunction with Visualize as well. If you wanted to do that cartoon outline, and you wanted to be able to overlay it on top of the final Visualize render, the two can work in tandem to get you some pretty cool results. Okay. So moving into Visualize. So let's actually close down SOLIDWORKS here real quick. And let's open Visualize up. So where PhotoView 360 is for that iterative design, and it can get you quick results directly inside of SOLIDWORKS. Visualize can give you quick results in the standalone program, and generally it's going to get you more realistic results than you're going to necessarily get with PhotoView 360. So generally your end use parts and marketing material, you're going to want to do it in Visualize. It is a very easy interface to navigate if you've never used it before. As of 2017 SP0, it navigates just like SOLIDWORKS does, so there's no kind of proprietary or new keyboard shortcuts or navigation stuff that you need to learn. It navigates exactly like SOLIDWORKS does, and it does bring in all of the cameras and materials and textures and decals that you apply in SolidWorks as well. So you can do all of that work up front in SolidWorks, and that'll all get translated through to Visualize. So let's go and pop it open, and I'm actually going to open up, or I'm going to start a new project. Okay, so what I'm going to do, just to kind of show some of the tools that you might not necessarily know about, and then kind of how well they work, I'm actually going to bring in a non-SolidWorks part. I'm going to bring in an OBJ file. So we'll wait until it opens up here. There we go. And we'll go ahead and import in. Let's bring in. We'll go to OBJ, and I'll bring in this model here. Okay, so bringing in our model, again, we can monitor this file if we want to, so that if it does change, it's going to update inside of Visualize, which is a really handy tool, especially if you're putting together marketing material on parts that have not been, completely finalized yet. You can set up all of your views, and then once everything does get finalized, it's going to update directly inside of Visualize, and you're not going to lose any of your work that you've already done. In this particular case, we're going to just hit OK. And it's going to bring our part in here. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do, I'm just going to change our environment real quick so that we can see this a little bit better. I am partial to the Dazzler environment. I just like it. But you can see this is just it's kind of a cool organic modeled. It's a wine glass, and it's got some wine pouring into the glass, and I think there's a couple ice cubes in there. So what we're going to do is first I'm going to rotate this to the right orientation. So I'm going to go ahead and rotate this. Oops, maybe in the right direction. There we go. Rotate it upward, and I'm just going to snap it to the floor. Okay. So it's kind of in the right orientation now. And what we can do is I'm going to use a tool called the formation tool. It's a tool that not a lot of people necessarily know about. But it is a great tool, especially for lining up multiple models. So I'm going to freeze this in place for transforming, okay? Meaning that it kind of resets everything so that this is now the original orientation of this part, because I don't want it to go back to the sideways. This is how I want to display it. But before I do any of that, one thing you'll notice, if I go to part selection, this entire piece is one part. Okay, which isn't really going to work for me because I want to be able to apply different appearances to this. So one great tool inside of Visualize that works really, really well is the split part command. Okay, so if we're in our part selection tool and we just right click, you can see we can extract parts. So if I go to extract part, I can change my facet tolerance. So in this case, I'm just going to bring it up just a little bit. And if I just click on part of this model, it's actually going to find parts that we can extract from this. And again, we can control kind of how broadly we highlight things with the angle tolerance, sorry. And when I execute the split, it actually splits that out into another part. Okay, so I can do the same thing with the wine glass. Right? I just click on the wine glass. It looks like it's grabbing what I want there, so I can go ahead and execute the split with that. Now, if I close that down, you can see I've got a couple parts in there. And if I go to apply appearances to these, they should apply separately. So if I say maybe make the wine glass transparent glass, and maybe make the actual wine, well, let's make it actually wine, why not? So we can go to our liquids and apply red wine to that. Right? Let's actually go into preview mode so we can see it a little bit better. Okay. And now what I can do is I can go ahead and hide these. And now I've got all these little bits here. I'm actually going to leave those as their own part, but I do want to have these ice cubes as separate parts. So I can go ahead again and do that extract part, and it's going to work really nice on these ice cubes. So I'm going to go ahead and make that into a part, and I'm going to make that into a part. Okay. And then again, maybe for these ones, I'll make this melting ice. And another quick tip in Visualize as well, if I'm in appearance selection mode and I hold down Shift, left mouse click to copy an appearance, and right mouse click to assign it to another part. Okay, and if I just unhide, right, Control Shift U will unhide everything that I have, and again, Shift right click, or sorry, Shift left click, and then right click to copy. Okay, so this is pretty much looking how I want it to look. If I go into accurate mode, well, and actually it looks like we've got a pretty crazy displacement map there. Let's actually change that up to, instead of melting ice, let's go with maybe a glass, like a translucent glass would probably look pretty good too. All right, so looking pretty good, but maybe I want to make a promo for either the wine glass or maybe even the wine or what have you. I want to have multiples and I want them to be lined up, right? So what we can do is that's where that formation tool comes in. So let's say I go to my models here, my model selection, and I use Control C and Control V, and we'll make, let's make 4 or 5, okay? And I can highlight them all, right? Actually, I'll grab just the top level models here. And you can see when I do that, I get this formation tool here. Okay, so this is another tip inside of Visualize that is fantastic. I use it all the time. And you can choose how you set up. If I just zoom out here a little bit, let me bring them a little bit closer together. Your parts, right? So we can put it in a V, we can put it in a circle if we want to. We can control how far apart it goes. Maybe we want it in a circle like this. Right? So kind of very, very cool, very easy way to set up everything. And then at that point in time, you can render it out. And each of these are all independent as well. So I could go ahead and I could change one appearance. Maybe I want to make one of these Scotch, because why not? And each of them are independent, so I can go ahead and change them all. So it's not like you change one and they're all going to change. So a couple great tips in Visualize as well. Okay, so getting in that formation tool and using that execute split. The split part is a great tool in Visualize, especially if you do have group parts that are coming out of SOLIDWORKS and you need to do a quick split. You can do it without having to bring it back into the design tool. Right? And again, you've got that GPU hardware acceleration in Visualize, right? CPU compared to GPU. So you can utilize CUDA cores if you've got an NVIDIA graphics card, and you can get much faster renders in both when you're setting up the render in accurate mode and also when you render out of Visualize. And then just kind of the last thing we want to go over, I think we've got about 5 minutes left, is PhotoView 360 and Visualize getting along. Okay, and kind of using one or the other. So the big thing that I use PhotoView 360 for before going into Visualize is anytime that I have textures that require direction. Most of the time it's wood grain. So if I just shut down SolidWorks here, or sorry, Visualize, and pop SolidWorks open. However you map the textures inside of SolidWorks, that will translate into Visualize. So if you don't want to take the time to line up all of your different wood grains, for instance, across faces, I just find it easier to line everything up in PhotoView because I've been working with PhotoView longer. I'll generally line it all up in PhotoView, and then I will import it into Visualize, and Visualize will translate all of that directly into directly from PhotoView 360. So for instance, if I've got in this case an Adirondack chair, right? And actually, I've kind of already started one here. So in this particular case, I just put some unfinished end grain on the edges here, and I put some finished polished spruce on the top. But even here, like all of these wood grains have already been applied. I could go in and I can adjust so that everything lines up, especially if you've got, and in this case, it's actually just sharp edges, but if you've got fillets, um, you kind of want the end grain to flow right between your flat edges and your fillets. So you can set all of that up in PhotoView. The only thing is, especially if you're putting in decals or textures, everything has to be projection currently, but there is some exciting stuff coming in Visualize 2018 that may or may not change that. And if you guys, speaking of 2018, the beta is out. It has been out for a couple of months now. So definitely, if you guys want to check it out, even if you just sign up for the beta so that you can read the what's new, there's some very exciting things coming in Visualize that that is it's very exciting both from within SolidWorks and in SolidWorks Visualize. But another great tip as well, and a great tool to use, is the Visualize add-in that will send this directly out to SolidWorks Visualize. So we can go ahead and use either a simple or advanced export. So simple essentially exports everything out by appearance. Export Advanced will export everything out by feature tree, and it'll also monitor the file so that if it gets changes in SolidWorks, it changes in Visualize as well. So those are kind of the difference between those export options. But what it's also going to do is it's going to bring in the cameras that we have in SolidWorks. It's going to bring in all of the textures, the decals, the environments, everything, so that it's ready to go and Visualize, and we can make little tweaks here and there. And then just one more quick tip inside of Visualize as well, especially if you're working with parts or assemblies that have very sharp corners. There is a great tool inside of Visualize, and maybe put this into preview mode, that if I go into part selection mode, let's say we grab this part here, of a corner radius. So if you do have very flat edges, you can put on a quarter radius, maybe 10 millimeters. Okay. And when we render that, I might have to get a little closer here, but it'll actually round that off 10 millimeters just to give it a little bit more reflection, to make it look a little bit better. So you can control that as well from piece to piece if you haven't applied an actual fillet. All right, so I think what we'll do, just because we are running out of time here, is we'll get to if there's any questions. So I do have a question saying Visualize cannot do animation videos unless you have the professional versions where PhotoView 360 can do videos, and that is absolutely true. So animations are done in PhotoView 360 Pro, whereas you can do the motion studies inside of SolidWorks and you can render them out in PhotoView 360 without, I mean, you'll be required to have SolidWorks Professional or higher, but you won't need any extra licensing for that. You will be able to render out videos. And of course, as I mentioned with the network rendering, you can network render videos as of SolidWorks 2017. Okay. I think we're going to end. We are right on the button at 2:30. Thank you so much for coming. Appreciate it. And again, any questions, anything, feel free to reach out to myself or our support team, and we can help you out with anything that you need.